Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One, and this is World DNA. I'm Jyotsna Kamal. Let's start with the headlines. West Asia tensions peak post the killing of Hezbollah chief Nasrallah. Hezbollah, Houthis, Iran and other Islamic nations vow revenge. Iran seeks urgent UNSC meet as several countries urge an end to hostilities and rhetoric. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is at a historic turning point after Nasrallah's killing that could change the balance of power in the region. Israel's defense minister holds talks on possible ground expansion of the offensive. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar rips into Pakistan in his address at the UN General Assembly, terms restoration of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to India as the issue to be resolved, warns that actions will have consequences. Russia strikes a hospital in Sumy region in Ukraine, killing 9 people, as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov invokes Moscow's nuclear capacity at the UNGA and warns Europe against what he calls a suicidal escapade. Austrians to vote to elect a new parliament on Sunday, with the far-right Freedom Party aiming for its first general election win. Economic worries and immigration the big issues. Insurgent violence in Pakistan's Balochistan again. 7 laborers from Pakistan's Punjab province killed in Panjgur. Outlawed Balochistan Liberation Army blamed for the attack. SpaceX launches Falcon 9 rocket from Florida to bring back Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore from the International Space Station. They will be returning in February. At least 99 killed, dozens missing as flash floods ravaged Nepal. More than 200 incidents of landslides reported across the country. West Asia is on edge after the killing of Hezbollah chief Nasrallah, with temperatures and rhetoric peaking amid concerns on the next step forward. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu say they have settled the score, but there's no end to continuous airstrikes by the Israel Air Force. Israeli strikes have continued on Beirut's southern suburbs, sending large clouds of smoke over the city. In Israel, air raid sirens sounded across the center of the country, including Tel Aviv. As it anticipates a response, the Israeli military has said that it intercepted a missile fired from Yemen that triggered the air raid sirens. Iran's axis of resistance has condemned the killing and vowed gruesome revenge. Hamas and Yemen-based Houthi rebels have said Nasrallah's assassination will only strengthen resistance. The Houthis have said that the killing of Nasrallah will strengthen their determination to confront their Israeli enemy.
We confirm to our dearest martyr, Hassan Nasrallah, and all his fellow martyrs in Lebanon and Palestine that we will remain stable and patient, and their blood will not be in vain.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that assassinating Nasrallah became an essential condition for Israel to achieve its war goals. Netanyahu claimed that Nasrallah's elimination would not only facilitate the return of residents of the northern Israel, but also promote the return of our hostages, as he called, held in Gaza. As the war nears the one-year mark, he emphasized that this is a historic turning point.
Citizens of Israel, these are great days. We are at what appears to be a historic turning point. A year ago, on October 7, our enemies attacked us and thought that Israel was on the way to extinction. A year later, blow after blow, achievement after achievement, they realize how far their hopes have faded. Israel is on the rise. We are winning. We are determined to continue to strike at our enemies, return our residents to their homes, and return all our hostages.
Meanwhile, thousands gathered in Iraqi capital Baghdad to protest and mourn the killing of the Hezbollah leader. In Tehran, posters of Nasrallah were put up bearing the slogan, "Hezbollah is alive." People chanted slogans against Israel and America. Amid widespread concern of an all-out regional war, diplomatic efforts to pacify tensions are at top gear. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has said he is gravely concerned by the dramatic escalation of events in Beirut in the last 24 hours. Russia, China, and other countries have called for restraint. And to discuss more, we're being joined by Colonel David Desroches. He's live from Washington. He is a former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and he's also the professor at the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, let me begin by asking you, Israel is continuing with its strikes in Lebanon, and Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has said that Nasrallah's killing would be avenged. And let me focus on this. His path in fighting Israel would be continued by other militants. It's most certain it is the biggest escalation we know. What kind of response are we looking at from Iran?
Well, to date, we haven't seen anything which would seem to imply that rather than an axis of resistance, which is what Iran and Hezbollah thought they had, an alliance among equals, what you've really got is a situation where Iran's Arab proxies, Hezbollah foremost amongst them, was a tool to serve Iranian interests. There will be some sort of performative act of revenge, but Iran had been counting on Lebanese Hezbollah as their insurance policy to prevent an attack upon Israel. And Iranian strategic culture is dominated by the idea of protecting another or preventing another attack on Iran's homeland as they suffered in the war with Iraq. So I think what we're likely to see are terrorist incidents directed against Israeli and Jewish interests, which the Iranian state views as one and the same overseas in places like South America, Africa, or Europe.
Right. Now, let me also ask you, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Israel is at a historic turning point, and this is after Nasrallah's killing, and that could change the balance of power in the region. How do you analyze this comment?
Well, I think what he means is that historically Israel has had to be very wary of how it deals with Iran's various proxies in Syria, in Iran, in Iraq, in Yemen, and of course Hamas, which is more of an indigenous organization that Iran adopted. But now the main threat to Israel was Lebanese Hezbollah. They had the advanced missiles. They had the ability to fire a large number of rockets and artillery shells into northern Israel. And they had the ability with some of the more advanced missiles to strike all of Israel. So it looks as though that is being taken off the table. And that will mean that Israel will be in a position where it can pursue its security interests without fear of effective retaliation from next door.
Now, President Joe Biden has called the Israeli strike that killed Nasrallah a measure of justice for his 4-decade reign of terror. Now, while the administration is also trying to look forward for a ceasefire, diplomatic solution, how do you think U.S. will now act?
Well, I think that had President Biden been consulted in advance, he would have said, don't do this. But now that it's happened, Hezbollah has a lot of American blood on its hand, and Hezbollah is in large measure responsible for the dysfunctionality of the Lebanese government due to the fact that they basically operate as a state within a state. They've assassinated Rafiq Hariri. They've killed journalists who have exposed their corruption. The port blast in Beirut was basically their ammunition storage facility that hit Beirut with the power of an atomic bomb. And then the power that they wield in the parliament has prevented Lebanon from forming an effective government. So aside from the U.S. interests in avenging those who've been killed by Hezbollah over the years, the fact is Lebanon is a failed state in large measure because of Hezbollah. So I think that there's an opportunity here for Lebanon to have a substantial reset and regain its rightful place as a country whose government matches its natural beauty and hospitality.
Right. Now, before I let you go, my last question would be, now, that being said, how does this escalation impact the ceasefire deal and the hostage release? Now, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is going to promote the hostage release. What do you think?
I don't think there's any connection. I think that this is a separate theater of war. Hamas took the hostages without reference to Lebanese Hezbollah, and Lebanese Hezbollah took several days to join in the fight against Israel on behalf of Hamas because they wanted to see if that uprising had legs. They've always been disconnected in all but the most performative and rhetorical sense.
All right, that was Cole Miroches. Thank you for joining us this morning and giving your insights.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on now. Now, who will be the next Hezbollah chief is the next question after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. The Iran-backed militant group is facing the challenge of choosing a new leader after the heaviest pounding in its 42-year-old history. As Hezbollah scrambles for its new heir, the spotlight is on Hashem Safieddin, widely seen as the second in command. He is the cousin of Nasrallah, and like him, he's a cleric who wears a black turban, denoting descent from Islam's prophet Muhammad. Safieddin studied alongside Nasrallah before being called back in Lebanon in 1994. Safieddin rose through Hezbollah's ranks, joining the Majlis al-Shura, the group's highest decision-making body, in 1995. Soon after, he was appointed as the head of the Jihad Council, solidifying his influence over Hezbollah's military and strategic operations. Elected as head of the Executive Council in 2001, Safieddin oversees Hezbollah's political affairs, making him a central figure in shaping Hezbollah's non-military activities. The U.S. State Department designated him a terrorist in 2017. Safieddin's public statements often reflect Hezbollah's militant stance and its alignment with the Palestinian cause. His influence also reaches Hezbollah's military operations, having been appointed military commander of the southern Lebanon in 2010, a key region in Hezbollah's long-standing conflict with Israel. All right, moving on, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar ripped into Pakistan at the UNGA for recent statements on Jammu and Kashmir, which he termed as bizarre. Dr. S. Jaishankar slammed the neighboring country as the fountainhead of terror in the region, lashing out on terror emanating from Pakistan targeting India. He said the only issue to be resolved between both the countries now is the restoration of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to India. He warned that Pakistan's anti-India actions would not be spared.
On the contrary, actions will certainly have consequences. The issue to be resolved between us is now only the vacation of illegally occupied Indian territory by Pakistan, and of course, the abandonment of Pakistan's long-standing attachment to terrorism.
India's External Affairs Minister said that the GDP of Pakistan could be measured in terms of radicalization and exports in terms of terror.
Today, we see the ills it sought to visit on others consume its own society. it can't blame the world. This is only karma. Madam President, a dysfunctional nation coveting the lands of others must be exposed and must be countered.
Further, Jaishankar said that the sanctioning of terrorists at the United Nations cannot be impeded for political reasons, in a reference to Pakistan's ally China, which has historically placed holds on those accused of committing acts of terror against India. Jaishankar stressed that the UN must step up to make the world a better place. He said that this was necessary, not because it is a competition of foreign influences, but because if we carry on like this, the state of the world will only get worse. India and Pakistan engaged in rounds of tit-for-tat remarks at the UNGA over Friday and Saturday. India's envoy to the United Nations, Bhavika Mangla-Anandan, reiterated New Delhi's stand, saying that Jammu and Kashmir is an inalienable and integral part of India. All right, moving to the Russia-Ukraine war now. In Ukraine, at least 10 people have been killed after Russian strikes hit a medical center in Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy. There were 86 patients and 38 staff members in the hospital at the time of the attack, according to Ukrainian officials. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the world to pay attention to what Russia is targeting. He said they are waging war on hospitals, civilian objects, and people's lives. Ukraine's Air Force earlier said that they had shot down 69 out of 73 drones during an overnight Russian attack that included 2 ballistic and cruise missiles. The military administration further said that about 15 Russian attack drones were destroyed by air defense forces on the outskirts of capital Kyiv. The attack comes as Zelensky is urging the West to allow Kyiv to use long-range precision weapons to strike deep inside Russia. In an interview, Zelensky said he received very direct information from the former U.S. President Donald Trump on supporting Ukraine if he wins the November polls. Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield have reacted to Zelensky's face-to-face meeting with Trump.
Просто меня удивляет, что
It surprises me that the US, with its biggest military budget, is afraid to supply us with weapons. They also create jobs while producing ammunition and expanding production. Nevertheless, I think it's easier to supply us and give us an ability to fight instead of sending American soldiers, like in Afghanistan and elsewhere.
Meanwhile, Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned against trying to fight to victory with a nuclear power. During an address at the UNGA, Lavrov said that the specter of nuclear threats and confrontation has hung over the war in Ukraine since the start.
I will not talk here about the senselessness and danger of the very idea of trying to fight to victory with a nuclear power, which is Russia. No less senseless is the incantation of Kyiv's Western masters about the lack of alternative to negotiations based on the notorious peace formula.
These comments by the Russian top diplomat comes 3 days after Russian President Vladimir Putin aired a shift in Moscow's nuclear doctrine, where he warned the West that Russia could use nuclear weapons if it was struck with conventional missiles, and that Moscow would consider any assault on it supported by nuclear power to be a joint attack. More than 2.5 years into the fighting, Russia is making slow but continuing gains in Ukraine's east. Meanwhile, Zelensky is pushing what he calls a peace formula, which has been rubbished by Moscow as a doomed ultimatum. The U.S. announced $375 million aid package for Ukraine, double the size of recent shipments. The aid package includes artillery ammunition, air defense, anti-tank missiles, and more of the critical weapons and equipment Washington has provided Kyiv. All right, moving on, at least 9 people have died and another 48 are missing after a boat carrying migrants capsized during a rescue operation near the Canary Islands. Now, Spain's maritime authorities say the boat carrying several migrants overturned as too many people moved to one side during the rescue attempt. Rescuers managed to save 27 people. Authorities deployed aircraft and helicopters of the Civil Guard, the Red Cross, and the local government in the operation. The tragedy occurred on a small boat just 4 miles from the island of El Hierro. The services say the rescue attempt was made more difficult as it was carried out at night, accompanied by the strong gusty winds. The Atlantic route from Africa to Canary Islands is the deadliest in the world. Despite that, the route has experienced a 154% surge in migrants this year, with 21,620 crossings to the archipelago in the last 7 months. Migrant rights groups say that each year the victims making the dangerous journey are in thousands. Many come from Mali, Senegal, Mauritius, and other West African nations seeking better job opportunities. Heavy rains in Nepal have led to massive flooding and landslides, killing at least 99 people, with 79 missing in the last 24 hours. More than 3,000 security personnel assisting rescue efforts. In Kathmandu, the Bagmati River is overflowing, submerging surrounding areas. Reports suggest 236 houses are flooded and several others are at risk. The flooding has claimed multiple fatalities in the valley. Domestic flights have been cancelled in the region, affecting over 150 departures.
What should we do now? This calamity has happened everywhere and not just to us. It is a big thing for us that our lives have been saved.
Multiple landslides have triggered the blockage of road and highways across the country. According to officials, over 65 highways and major roads in 28 locations are obstructed. The risk of landslides has increased in 42 districts due to heavy rain. This has left hundreds of travelers stranded. According to reports, police are working to clear debris and reopen roads to traffic. The torrential rains that began on Friday in most central and eastern areas of Nepal are expected to continue till Sunday. Authorities have issued a warning of flash floods in multiple rivers. According to the officials, the Koshi River that causes deadly floods in India's eastern neighboring state of Bihar almost every year is on high alert due to the disaster. All right, moving on, Elon Musk's SpaceX has launched its Falcon 9 rocket from Florida. One of the central objectives of the mission is to bring back Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. Now, astronauts Williams and Wilmore have been stranded aboard the International Space Station, the ISS, since June this year, following safety issues on their Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. The rescue operation carried out by SpaceX's Dragon vessel will have 4 seats, 2 of which is assigned for NASA's Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gurbanov undertaking the mission, while the other 2 will remain empty to accommodate Williams and Wilmore. Though the spacecraft will be docking the ISS on Sunday, the astronauts, however, are not expected to return until February next year. The rescue operation comes nearly 3 months after Boeing's Starliner spacecraft made its first flight by docking Williams and Wilmore aboard the ISS back in June. This means that astronauts would have spent 8 months by the time they returned to Earth. The stay, which was scheduled just for 8 days, was extended after technical issues were identified in the propulsions of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. This included effects in its thrusters and helium leakages. SpaceX's rescue operation was postponed from August to September as NASA wanted to study Starliner's reliability. It was further delayed due to Hurricane Helene that wreaked havoc across Florida. Moving to some entertainment news, at the ongoing Paris Fashion Week, a collection named Helios has left fashion lovers impressed. More about it in our next story.
It's all about Greece. It's a trip to Greece, to the sun. I call it the collection Helios, like the god of the sun in Greek mythology. and it's all about jet set icons, Maria Callas-Jackie-O and Elizabeth Taylor in a movie called Boom, which is really crazy. And yes, all they come together to have a big party.
With that, we call a wrap to World DNA. Do stay tuned. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
This week on the West Asia Post, Lebanon is experiencing its deadliest week since the start of the civil war. As Lebanese death toll continues to mount, Hezbollah says it struck Mossad's base in Tel Aviv. Israeli forces are preparing for a possible ground offensive in Lebanon, as fears of a regional war rise by the hour. U.S. Secretary of State is accused of lying about aid to Gaza. Also on the show, we tell you more about Iran's readiness to revive the nuclear deal and the growing U.S.-UAE defense ties.
Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION World is One.
Coldplay announces its India tour, and we take a look at the ticket frenzy, the sustainability drives, and everything else that follows the announcement. Meet Team Lapata Ladies as the movie becomes India's official Oscar entry.
कल रात को विदा करा के वापस लौट रहा था, तो रास्ता में इसकी बीबी खो गई।
And take a look at the recently arrested rapper Sean Diddy Combs' criminal timeline.